Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Front Office Playbook. I am Colin Henderson. Joining me today, Eli Danson and Adam Datema. How you doing, boys? We are almost 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. We are in crunch time from a front office perspective. I'm excited. How excited are you guys?
Just get me there. Just get me there.
Just just
I
skipped
got
right
I
to the
got
finish
a
line.
lot of film. I got a lot of film left to watch, but it's a very good draft. I know we don't have the quarterbacks or the receivers that we're used to the past few years, but it's a great draft, and teams will change through this first round, especially. So
Yeah,
just get me
yeah, this
there.
has got a very December 1st waiting for Christmas to happen where I'm like, I know it's only 3 weeks away, but like, let's go. Eli, what are you most looking forward to from the draft coming up?
That it being hosted in the greatest city of the greatest team in the
I feel like
NFL. The
I feel like
draft
I
in
set you
Green
up for
Bay,
that.
it's going to be like 40 degrees out. Everybody's going to be miserable except for the green and gold, and they'll just be so happy. But seriously, they've done a lot of work in the Titletown district. It's going to rock people how great that area is and how fun the city is. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised just by the quality of the draft, having it be in Green Bay. So it's just going to be amazing. Seeing Lambeau and everything in the background. There's no better place. Absolutely not. No better place.
Yeah,
All
been
right,
hearing that
love it.
from
I'm looking
reporters.
forward to seeing what Green Bay rolls up on this thing, how they show up to the world on this smallest market in America for a professional football or a professional sports franchise, and they are going to have the entire world spotlight directed on them. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Used to it. They got the quarterbacks to be used to it.
Yep.
Oh, look, I don't have enough time to go on my rant about how dare the Packers have quarterback continuity for 4 decades. I don't have time for that. All right. We have to get to some of the actual stuff from this episode. So for those of you who have not joined us before or seeing us for the first time now, first off, welcome. We here at the Front Office Playbook are here to talk through every major move around the NFL with a highlight on the most important position in sports, the general manager. Some can play, some can coach, but few can put together a championship roster, and that's what we're here to discuss. So be sure to hang out with us on all of our social channels as we follow the NFL GM schedule from offseason to draft and from OTAs to kickoff. Coming up on the show today, we're turning our attention to the upcoming NFL draft. With a deep crop of prospects on the defensive line in this draft, we're going to highlight a few teams that will be targeting that position in a few weeks and how we'd best go about acquiring those players onto our rosters. And while this episode will be mainly focused on the D line today, be sure to check back in daily for more draft analysis as we rapidly approach the first round of the draft on April 24th. Adam and Eli have been deep diving in their draft prep. So before we start to look at this position from a team perspective, let's first discuss some of the bigger names that will hear their names called in just 3 short weeks. Adam, why don't you give us a little preview of the defensive line class coming out in this draft, how it compares to the prior years and how deep it is in comparison to other drafts?
Yeah, well, the anyone could tell you the belle of the ball is Mason Graham, D tackle out of Michigan, and he deserves it. It's just I genuinely didn't watch that much film on him because you watch a little bit and it's like, all right, this guy moves differently than everyone else. He's that man amongst boys that you're kind of looking for, especially with linemen coming out of college. So he's the top of it, and it is a deep class. It's interesting. There doesn't seem to be anyone elite besides Mason Graham, but there are starters you can draft even into the second round. And like looking back to last year's class, it was a pretty deep class. Again, not anyone necessarily elite at the interior defensive spots, but it did have guys, like Darius Robinson to the Cardinals. We don't really know what he did yet. He got injured either game one or in preseason something, but he's expected to be good. Johnny Newton, Jerzon Newton, whatever you want to call him, on the Commanders. Tavondre Sweat to the Titans. He was good last year. Braden Fisk to the Rams obviously was great. So last year did have some D tackles that weren't necessarily highly touted. Byron Murphy to the Seahawks was probably the highest D tackle, in the draft last year, and he was decent. But it was a draft that produced starting D tackles, not necessarily stars, but starting D tackles. And I think outside of Mason Graham, this draft is going to be similar. I just, maybe it's recency bias looking at it. I think it's a little deeper than last year, but I need to also understand that some of these guys aren't going to turn out how I expect them to. So it probably will be similar to last year, except with probably one guy at the top, unlike last year's.
Eli, the defensive line, I mean, most analysts have said that this is overall a deep draft class when it comes to this overall position. Are there players outside of the players that Adam just mentioned, which is at the very top of the draft? What players are you particularly looking at that are a little lower on that list that you think could potentially play above where they end up getting drafted?
Yeah, there are a couple guys in that third range I think will be plus starters in the pros, which at the third round is already above the draft value that you're looking at. A third round pick is normally somewhere in a rotational to backup level player, hoping for more. There are two guys in particular I think are above that are going to fall little. First is CJ West out of Indiana, who, when you watch an Indiana game this past season, the player they talk about the most on the defensive side on either team was always CJ West. Is always making an impact on the interior defensive lineman. He won't go as high as other guys because his measurables are just not elite. But you are getting a plus starter probably for 8 years along the defensive line. And another player is Alfred Collins. Is a little on the flip side where he has a little more upside as a player. He has great size on the position. It's just been inconsistent. And has some injury concerns through his career. So those two guys, I mean, he's out of Texas. Yeah. So there are guys in the third round this year that I think are going to provide really great value for teams for a while when they're on their roster.
Adam, anybody else you want to add to that list?
Yes. My guy, Shemar Turner. I think the fact he was on a D line with at least two other NFL prospects may have hit him a little bit, especially because those guys were D ends. And, Shamar Stewart didn't necessarily put up huge numbers, sack totals as a D end, but clearly disruptive, athletic anomaly. So I think he got a lot of the attention and still is, especially because Shamar Stewart, the D end, is almost as big as Shemar Turner, the D tackle. But watching Shemar Turner, we'll get into it a little later, a little more later. But he's got almost everything, and I'm really excited about Shemar Turner. He's one of the best defensive tackles in this draft.
Excellent. So now that we've kind of set the table a little bit from the defensive line standpoint, Adam and Eli have both highlighted a few teams that we expect to be in the market for defensive line help in this draft. So we kind of set up the mental challenge of trying to figure out how we would tackle, if we were the GMs of these teams, how we would go about trying to add defensive line in this draft. Both Eli and Adam have picked 3 different teams. We're going to try and hit as many of them as we can during this episode. Adam, why don't we start with you here? Tell me what team that you believe is going to highlight this position in the draft. Tell me why you have picked this team in the first place, and then talk about what players are you, knowing their draft capital, what players are you targeting, and how are you trying to go about it?
Yeah, so first team I will speak on is a bit of an obvious one in the Bengals. Obviously a lot of money spent on the offensive side this offseason. Still trying to figure it out with Trey Hendrickson. We'll see. Yeah, I figure they will get it figured out, but it's been a little weird recently. A few comments made from ownership side. He goes on Pat McAfee in response. So, they're definitely
so ridiculous.
They're definitely negotiating. We'll say that. But outside of Trey Hendrickson, they re-signed Joseph Osai, who solid player. Nothing special in terms of production in the league so far, but a few years ago watching him come out of college, I thought he was great. I liked him a lot, and he's made the team and got re-signed, so they have to think something of him. They're also a little desperate, but they got BJ Hill, TJ Slayton, some more solid players, but outside of Trey Hendrickson, it really is just solid players, not even really good players at this point, I'd say. but on their defense, they don't really have a whole lot of good players in general. So if the D line is at least solid and the rest is not even that, I say lean in on the D line. I say you got to draft at least two guys early for the Bengals to, you're going to be in shootouts. There's no one in the league who thinks that this team is going to be a ground and pound like 24-21 wins every week. Like, no, they're going to be in shootouts. So let's get this D line right. Let's get the DBs so they can just sit back in zone and pick off the ball once the quarterback makes a bad decision from getting hassled every single play. So all right, you got one incredible player and three solid players. I think with the 17th pick and the 49th pick, and even if you have to use, they have the 81st pick, it's in the third round, they can use that to move up in the second round if they really need it, which I would recommend personally. 17th pick, get someone who's going to bring you a little pass rush. I think that could be, it's tough. It's tough because the pass rushers are, in my eyes, rated a little lower in this draft than the big guys. So like Kenneth Grant is, if you need a starter at D tackle and you draft Kenneth Grant, you have a starter at D tackle. You can just plug and play Kenneth Grant. Will he be there at 17? Probably. Will Walter Nolan, who I know a lot of people have projected to the Bengals at this point, be there? Yeah, and he has incredible athletic ability, and he was like the number one recruit in the nation coming out of high school. But personally, the inconsistency on tape, when he had a good get off, he would dominate dudes because he has good leverage, he has good strength. So when he had a good get off, he would, like, O-line would be totally struggling to deal with him. But the get off was so inconsistent, and not even the get off, the next few steps too would just be like slow and hesitant and kind of watching. And then he would pick a direction to go and go hard in that direction. And he's fast, so he'd get there. But I don't know. I saw a little too much hesitancy and a little too much. I don't know. I don't want to say a bad word here, but just tippy tapping around, dancing around
Soft.
linemen.
Soft.
I don't want to go that far. I want to stop just in front of soft, but the inconsistency makes me think that he's not just that dominant D lineman who just wants to go out there and blow everything up. Michael Bennett, I don't really have technique, but I'm just going to mess up your entire blocking scheme. I would like to see a little more of that out of Walter Nolan. So I think I would go at 17, Kenneth Grant over Walter Nolan. And he's not going to give you that much in the pass rush, at least at first. He is very athletic for a 340-pound man. Like, it is really special to watch him move. But if you get him there, okay, fine. You can shore up your run game. Maybe he contributes against the pass. Trey Hendrickson, Walter Nolan, B.J. Hill, Joseph Osai, T.J. Sladen, okay, looking a little better. We get to the 49th pick. That's when I think you really can go with, I hope he's there. And he hasn't been talked about that much. But that's where I would try and maybe use that 81st pick to trade up to like 34 or something early in the second round to get Shamar Turner because, okay, you got Walter Nolan who's just going to plug everything up and he's good. He's a solid effort guy. There was a one highlight that came out of him chasing a running back like 60 yards downfield. Mm-hmm. I also watched a game where I really criticized his effort. And it was early in the season, so I'm kind of wondering if maybe the coaches showed him that film and said, hey, get on your shit, Kenneth. And then the rest of the season he did, which he should be given credit for if that's what happened, because he did take that coaching. But yeah, so I think Walter Nolan at 17, and then maybe use that 81st to trade up in the second round to get Shamar Turner. And you're going to be able to collapse pockets with Walter Nolan, B.J. Hill, Shamar Turner, and Trey Hendrickson, who, yeah, he's an end, but he's a bully, and he collapses pockets.
Okay, so as we talk about that, I mean, in this scenario that you're talking about, and I know we're focusing on defensive line in this episode, but you're standing there and ready to go with defensive line not only once, but to trade your third round pick to move up to get a second defensive lineman. Yes, how much of this is because of the question mark around Trey Hendrickson, and how much of this is because you like the defensive line in this class more than, say, the defensive backs in this class, whereas where you would expect, okay, fine, I'm totally with you on drafting defense early, especially if I'm the Bengals after the amount of money I've just invested on offense, but you want to double, if not triple dip on the defensive line and not in the secondary. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of everything you said, where I do like the D line class better than the DB class, but I also think it's where the Bengals are right now. They're not going to be able to fix their defensive back room in this class. And right now they have kind of gone all in on offense. And so really I think their only hope at competing for the playoffs and then a championship is if they just have a dominant D line where, okay, we're going to put up points and then our D line is going to get sacks and force your QB into bad decisions so that we get turnovers. And those turnovers are going to be the difference in the game. I don't think if they, pick different positions on the defense or pick a different position to go all in on the defense in this draft, I don't think they're going to get enough bang for their buck as they would as going all in on the defensive line, where they're in the position where they can, and this is a draft class where it can make a difference. And I think, it again, go all in on the D line. It's going to cover up a lot of holes on the rest of that defense.
Also important to note, as a general manager for the Bengals, you're building your roster to compete against your division. It's always first thing that you're looking at, and you're building up from there in your conference and then across to win a Super Bowl. And you're facing the Steelers and the Ravens 4 times a year. You need beef and you need bodies to be able to compete against Justin Fields and Lamar and Henry and, well, not Najee anymore, thank God, but Steelers, right? We'll add a couple bodies in the running back room this offseason. So I really like that idea for the Bengals of adding multiple bodies to withstand the physicality and the sheer like the temp of playing in the cold up north, right? And having up bodies able to rotate in there, I think makes a lot of sense for the Bengals.
Yeah, you said it at the end there. That rotation is going to be key because this will give them enough guys to actually rotate like a 6-man, 7-man front.
Well, as we sit here right now with Kenny Pickett as the quarterback in Pittsburgh, nothing like loading up that defensive line. Got to get into him quick. He's mobile on those feet, man. He's him and
Lamar.
Lamar, basically same person, basically at this point.
Yeah.
Very curious where Pittsburgh goes with that quarterback position. Is that Aaron Rodgers there? Is that Jackson Dart there? We'll get into a quarterback episode both? Soon enough. It might be both for all we know. Kenny Pickett, the quarterback in Seattle right now,
Fields.
which is astounding. Well, honestly, is it that much? Is it that much different? It's a different player, but I'm not sure if the production is going to be all that different here. Eli, why don't you talk to us about your team? Highlight a team that you think is in the market for a defensive lineman. Tell me why they're in the market for a defensive lineman and why you chose them. And then tell me a little bit about the players that you're looking to target with their draft capital in this draft.
Yeah, we spoke of them earlier in the episode. The team that is hosting this year's draft, the Green Bay Packers, best team in the NFL. They're in a very interesting place on their defensive front with what GM Gutekunst has invested in the position. These are premium positions with which Goody loves investing in and loves putting high draft capital in. And the return on investment that he's made has certainly been below what you would expect that many high picks at the position. He had multiple opportunities this offseason being asked in interviews to throw players under the bus. And every single time he threw the defensive line coach under the bus, a guy named Jason Rebrovich, who they fired this offseason, where Goot said, we believe we have the guys in the building to have a top tier pass rush. And there were reports of players not liking him as a coach. He was kind of a motivator guy, not a technician. And when you watch the Packers defensive line play this year, Adam, like you said about Kenneth, it was just patty cake all season. It was ridiculous. High-end athletes not making any physical moves along the defensive line. You think of Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Devonta Wyatt. These are top-tier athletes in the NFL who won the previous year on their physicality. Rashawn Gary has one of the best power to speed rushes in the league. This last year, he barely used it at all. Now, in this room, there are solid players. Carl Brooks, solid pick in the 6th round. Colby Wooden, solid pick in the 4th round. And again, those high picks. When you look at this room, there is no star potential in this group. Rashawn Gary, really good edge rusher, probably overpaid. Devonte Wyatt, good pass rusher on the inside, one of the top pressure players, can't finish a sack to save his life. He would be a 12, 13 sack a year guy if he could just. And so we need to add a star potential piece, which when you're drafting in the 20s every year as a GM is the difficulty these teams face. There are 2 examples that come to mind that fit this bill of where the Packers are. Think of the Eagles when they drafted Fletcher Cox and the Chiefs when they drafted Chris Jones. These are 2 high-end athletes whose flashes on tape of their college tape were excellent. And but they were a little inconsistent coming out of college. And so, Adam, you had already mentioned him. Kenneth Grant is the guy for me for the Packers at 23. That makes all the sense in the world. You're talking about 2-inch taller BJ Raji, right? Just the size and the ability to move his feet so quickly at the size. He looks like a panda on the field. And because of that, some of his drive, right? Some of his drive into offensive linemen feels a little lackluster because he doesn't have the heavy feet all the time to drive into those offensive linemen. But that size and athleticism and the flashes are so tantalizing. And as a GM, we are trying to get to the Super Bowl. We need potential superstars. So even if this guy is inconsistent his first 2 years, those 3-4 flash plays that he can make for us on the defense are going to be the impact we need to potentially get us over the hump against those top tier teams like the Eagles. You look at what Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, right, are able to do along the inside in those impact game wrecking plays. That's what this team needs. That's, as a GM, what I think Goody should be targeting for the.
Need your big boy.
Need a big boy.
You mentioned Kenneth Grant there again. The production in college, not particularly, the numbers don't overwhelm you, but his impact is immediately noticeable upon tape. Like, as you said, Eli, for a guy that big, for him to move as fast as he does, if he can, similar to, again, take a player who went to the same college in Rashawn Gary, who did not put up particularly amazing counting stats, but the raw physicality and athleticism was so unbelievably rampant that he was a 1st-round talent.
Yeah, Gary
Kenneth
had
Grant in a similar sense on that front. What's that?
Gary had like 1 sack or 1.5
yeah,
sacks.
It was. He did not have a particular. He had pressures. He had pressures, but he didn't have sacks.
Yeah,
and he went to
over 10 in the NFL, like multiple seasons or something.
Exactly. And I think Kenneth Grant kind of follows, if he wants to follow that same blueprint, it makes a ton of sense. This is a guy who is just physically talented, but just has not particularly put quarterback on ground. If that goes up even 20%, 30%, we're talking about a guy who could be drafted. You could be getting a steal at 23. Eli, if you're talking about from that 23 spot, is the D-line the most important spot that you're looking for at that 23 spot for the Packers? Or are there another position that you think that they might look at for that 1st round and maybe punt the defensive line to the 2nd or 3rd round?
Yeah, anything along the defense, which is pretty much what the Packers have drafted for the last 15 years, will be somewhere where they target. So outside corner, or defensive line, take a good player at either of those positions. And I think that would provide a lot of juice to what was already a top 10 defense by EPA this last year. A lot of that, just like the offense, I feel was more from the skill of the coach in putting players in advantageous positions compared to the individual talent of the players, which could, push them into a top 5, top 3 defense. When you're looking at a guy like Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, and scouting these players and thinking about building the roster, what's always in the back of my mind is you think of any sort of martial art when you're a beginning guy on a mat, and the moves that you're able to do you can do stuff with poor technique, but your athleticism or instinct will get you by. And as you move up belt to belt to belt, the tools that you think you can use get shut down by higher tier players. Right. And so looking at college guys, I think of it, college football players, thinking of it in the same way as what are the tools that you can use against top tier NFL offensive linemen to be successful, right? And any defensive lineman that you're taking in the first round has to have something, some distinguishable trait that can have them win against NFL offensive linemen. So Nolan has his athleticism, Grant has his size, Mason Graham has his technique. And those three guys, clear first round defensive linemen. You start getting to guys like Derek Harmon, good, solid player. What's the distinguishable trait he uses to win? I'm not quite sure. That's a second round guy to me.
Well, I can comment on Derek Harmon real quick. You were mentioning earlier your boy Devontae Wyatt misses a lot of tackles. He'd be a 12 sack guy if he didn't. Derek Harmon, oh my God, I have never seen a D line, and I like him. I think you could take him on day 2, and he would immediately be able to help your pass rush, and you could develop him into a solid player over the years. But I don't know that I've ever seen a D lineman miss more tackles than Derek Harmon on film, which at a certain point that has to be concerning. Grip strength.
It is, yeah. It's
I mean,
great.
if the point of defense is to put the ball carrier on the ground, then yeah, I think it's a little alarming.
Hey, coach, I almost had Pat Mahomes on that tackle.
Almost got him.
Right there, guy.
All right, what happened?
Almost got him.
Touchdown. Like, almost is fine, right? But finishing and impact is important too. So, yeah, that's where the Packers.
I made that highlight look a lot cooler for him when he posted online. He's got a missed tackle now.
All right, Adam, let's move on to the next team here. You're going to highlight the Cardinals here. Draft capital this upcoming draft. They're picking 16, 47 in the second round, and number 78 in the third. Talk us through why you chose the Cardinals and their defensive line output for the upcoming draft.
Yeah, so the Cardinals really focused on the D-line in free agency, and I was a fan of that. I think Jonathan Gannon saw his former team dominate the Super Bowl with an incredible defensive line, and he was like, yeah, okay, it's time to I know what made it work when I was back in Philly. It's time to get that here too. So, the year before they took Darius Alexander in the first round, and that didn't work out because he got injured immediately, is expected to still be a good player. So, he could be a 3-tech, he could be a DN. Let's say he's a 3-tech. And let's say that, the other D tackle is the guy they signed in free agency, Dalvin Tomlinson. He's been a solid player for a while. No superstar, but a solid player. So they also got Josh Sweat in free agency. Great pass rusher, just great overall defensive end. And Baron Browning, they re-signed. I think it was like a 2-year, $14 million deal. So clearly expected to be the starter, but not, again, a superstar. So they focused on the D-line, but they didn't necessarily get superstars. So this is another one where I think, okay, they could. They could turn this into the clear strength of their defense. So again, they have 4 starting caliber NFL players. At 16, is there going to be someone? Well, I don't think Kenneth Grant could make it, but we've talked about him enough. And
16 would seem a little high for Kenneth Grant, at least by current projections, as much as you can trust current projections. But 16 does feel a little high for that type of position. So are you potentially looking elsewhere for the first round and looking D linemen for, say, second and third?
No, because very similarly to the Bengals, I think that, Budda Baker's a great player. I believe they have a corner. Is Sean Murphy Bunting old now? I think they have a corner who's pretty solid too. So I think I shouldn't really comment too much on that. But again, similarly to the Bengals, I think the Cardinals, they have decided they want to make their D-line a strength, but they haven't gotten there yet. So I think this draft can help them get there. And I think the way they do it is by trading back in the first round. And they don't even I wouldn't necessarily target Kenneth Grant for the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals, they're a good defense. They want to stop the run, but I almost more imagine, just based on the Darius Alexander pick from last year, he's a bit of a tweener, D tackle, D end. Seems like they want him to be just a disruptor. So if they are going for disruptors, I say trade back to the end of the first round and actually get some pretty good picks in return. You know, they're going to be lower picks. Maybe it's just one pick, but it's like a third, maybe fourth rounder. And then package that with the 78th pick to trade back up in the second round. So then you get 2 picks between the late first and the early second. And again, fix that D line. That's where you can do it. Shamar Turner, man, it almost depends on what you're hearing from other teams. So I think Shamar Turner and TJ Sanders out of South Carolina, he's a good pass rusher. TJ Sanders can rush the passer. That is a guy you can immediately plug in and say he is going to help get pressure on the quarterback from the inside position. And then Shamar Turner, he is a guy who maybe he's not consistent as the pass rusher. Maybe he's not consistent as a run stopper. I mean, he is pretty consistent as a run stopper. But Shamar Turner's effort and his just overall strength and explosiveness is going to make him so disruptive. You get TJ Sanders and Shamar Turner in that, you can put them, both of those players, out at the end on early downs, in the middle of the pass rush on later downs. You have immediately 6 D linemen that you can put, I mean, maybe with the exception of BJ Hill not BJ Hill, Dalvin Tomlinson and Baron Browning, who pretty stuck at D tackle and D end. The other 4 guys, you can really move wherever you want. And I think that's something Jonathan Gannon's going to really like. And I think that's something that could cause a lot of issues for opposing offenses.
Yeah, in the corner, Garrett Williams is the corner on the Cardinals, who's a good, solid player. And the first round pick, Darius Robinson. Alexander is the 25-year-old out of Toledo this year.
Oh my God. I kept looking at his name on my notes.
Yeah.
I said it 100 times, didn't I? Okay. Yeah. Darius Robinson. Okay. Out of Missouri, too, of course.
Yeah, you're home.
Shame.
The Cardinals defense is really the epitome of the where the NFL is going in positionless players.
Yes.
And a player, how would you feel about a player like Jalen Walker to the Cardinals in the first round, sticking and picking, a guy who's versatile on the edge, can drop back a little bit, but is athletic, has chased down Jalen Milroe before. Any defensive player who's doing that in the open field, it's got some juice. How would you feel about a player like that to them?
I couldn't argue with it. I'm not necessarily convinced he would be there at 16. But also, when I look at the Cardinals, I see Josh Sweat, Baron Browning, and Darius Robinson, 3 guys who can play on the outside. Zaven Collins can even pass rush a little bit. And I see Dalvin Tomlinson as the only interior disruptor. Again, because Darius Robinson, I had it wrong in my notes. That's why. Okay. Yep. Darius Robinson. We don't know if he's going to be consistent interior disruptor. So I think getting guys like TJ Sanders and Shamar Turner as disruptors on the interior, when you have proven disruptors on the ends as well, I think that's more the direction I would go. Jalen Walker, incredible player. And if the Cardinals pick him, he's going to get a lot of sacks for you. He's going to be a good player. I just would go with a different strategy.
Cardinals there, I mean, obviously a team that wants to compete, but still feels like it's another year or so away from doing so. Yeah. I wonder how much, we talk about, you mentioned trading back and then trying to trade up. I wonder what the mindset is on that team right now when it comes to roster building. Are they trying to take more bites at the apple and where they want more picks, or do they want to try and take those picks and amalgamate them into and consolidate them into ideally better players, but just a smaller number of them? That defense was a middling defense to below average defense last year. I would imagine this year there'd be at least some emphasis to try and, again, signing Josh Sweat in the offseason is one of the biggest signings on the defensive side. That was a big statement. But we haven't seen Josh Sweat produce at an elite level without a elite defense around him. I would imagine the Cardinals.
I want to stop you there.
Go for it.
Josh Sweat coming out of college, and I have friends who can attest to this. I loved Josh Sweat because he has always had incredible leverage and incredible hands paired with just pure athleticism. So I think it took a
Oh, I
year
think he's a
or
very
so
good player.
for him
But
to
I
be
just want to see the
refined,
production when he is the guy. When he
yeah.
is the guy who is asked to, who is paid to be the guy.
I
on
guess
that
I'm saying I
defense.
trust
I
him
wanna
to
see it.
be the guy. Like I've
All
liked
right,
him
well
for a
then-
long time, and I've seen him develop. I think it will work out there.
All right. He's that guy. All right. He's that bish. All right. Let's move over to another one. Eli, talk us to our next team that you have targeting defensive line in this draft. And tell us why and who they should be looking at.
So Dan Morgan on the Carolina Panthers, big spender this offseason, bringing in a lot of depth to the worst run defense in the NFL, one of the worst run defenses of the last 20 years. They have
And sorry,
star
I
Derek.
want to point out one thing: brought in depth, and Derek Brown only played one game last year, so brought in depth and basically got Derek Brown too for this year.
Yep. So bringing
Good
back
things.
Derek Brown, who's one of the top defensive tackles in the league, Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton, really solid run defenders in the middle of the defense. They have Jadeveon Clowney, who is still kicking it and still just, playing on his 1-year deals and doing his best. The window that this team is in is about 2 years away from competing. This season is about bringing incompetency to competency. And so adding a player who is going to raise the ceiling of this team makes a lot of sense to me from a general manager perspective. We're already bringing up the floor with our free agent additions. So let's add someone who has the potential to be a star. And if he is not the player we don't think he is, it's not really affecting the window of when we're trying to compete for championships. And so this may be a little rich for some people at 8 overall. Michael Williams has such unique physical traits to work with. There's the famous shot from him warming up from the first game of the year of him doing a long arm, and it is insane. I talked earlier about what are you going to use to beat NFL players? That is something that can work. Give me that guy who you can't touch because his long arm is so good. And the way that he's able to change direction on the field feels very much like a middle linebacker. Is he the most polished technician yet? No. He's also 20 years old. And so we have time for him to develop in the NFL. If it takes 2 to 3 years, that's perfect in the window. We have time for him to play on the team because we're not expected to win. So he can develop while learning on the field. Perfect use of resources as a general manager. And when you look at his 2024 tape, he messed up his ankle bad at the beginning of the season last year. It clearly was affecting him all year. He was not the exact same type of athlete as he was the previous year for the Georgia defense. Again, when you're talking about starters as freshmen in the SEC, it's Brock Bowers on the defensive side with way less production, mind you. But that same idea, Derek Stingley going out and being able to start as a freshman, these players are the best guys in the league. So take those players early, bet on your staff to develop unique physical traits. I think would be an amazing addition to the size and beef that they have along their defensive front. And like you said, Adam, right there, taking this position of weakness to a position of strength in one off season. I think that's an awesome way to look at the roster and to build it going forward. That would be an awesome pick for Dan Morgan. And if 8 is a little rich for you, you can probably move back to like 11. San Francisco moving up, or maybe the Saints want to come up and take Shedeur if he falls. There are a couple really good trade down candidates in the early teens. If 8 is a little rich for Michael for you, I think that would be an option out there too.
Yeah, I want to say I agree with your pick, but I disagree with your reasoning. I think the Panthers are a little closer to playoff contention than you're giving them credit for, and I think Michael Williams could come in immediately and contribute to that. So again, I don't necessarily dislike the pick. I think they're a little closer, and Michael is a little closer than you're giving them credit for. But
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like.
I can clarify. When I say ready to compete, I mean Super Bowls. I'm a Packer fan. We don't care about division titles. That means nothing to me. It's all
When's your
about
last Super
Super
Bowl?
Bowls.
Over a decade ago? It doesn't count anymore. You don't get to brag about a Super Bowl from over a decade ago. Was it over a
Okay,
decade? It was,
not
right?
not bragging, just saying the expectation of a general manager is to win Super Bowls. And if that's not the vision of my
I'm with
team,
you on this.
then I am in the
Yep.
wrong job.
Giants fans with
Right?
them.
And so Michael, right? Michael is a player who can help a Super Bowl defense, right? And I think that is the reasoning. Yeah, I think the Panthers could make the playoffs this year. They're in a bad division. Bryce Young showed improvement at the end of the year. They raised the floor of this defense. They have serviceable offensive players and a good O line. Like that is a 9-win team, right? That team can make the playoffs. But looking at the Super Bowl window is what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Just clarify. Yeah.
Let's also keep in mind that Adam is the same guy who tried to offload Bryce Young to anybody who could possibly take him in a dynasty fantasy league that we're in this past
But
year, was doing everything
no.
in his power to offload that. He is a little higher on the Panthers than the consensus in
But
this world.
yeah, okay, exactly. I was trying to offload Bryce Young because I thought he was good, and then when I realized that no one else thought he was as good as I did, I was like, all right, you guys are offering me like a third round pick for him. Get
Well,
out of
and then
here.
oddly enough, well, it's okay. Right after that, he got benched for a couple games and then really proved that point. Let's talk
Yeah.
about a couple more teams that are in the defensive line market. Let's kind of rapid fire a couple of these things. Adam, Eli, tell me a couple teams that you expect to be looking at defensive line in the first 2 days of the draft, and kind of talk to me. And also on top of that, give me at least one player that you stake your reputation on. Not Kenneth Grant, not someone at the top. Give me someone that you are ready to say, hey, I want this clip to be shown 2 years from now because I was right on this guy in the third plus round. Give me that player as well. Adam, you start with us.
Yeah, so I think a team that maybe wouldn't be expected to target the D line but could in the draft is the Jets. And I'm not necessarily sure they would with the seventh overall pick. Maybe if, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams really was attractive to them, they could go there. And, it sounds like Eli, as much as you like Michael Williams, it may even be a reach for you at number 7. I've heard Tyler Warren there, and I don't totally hate Tyler Warren there. So I think if the Jets target D line, it would be with that 42nd pick and maybe the 73rd pick. Eli, maybe your boy out of Indiana in the third round would be nice there. But I think in the second round, Darius Alexander could be real good. I see Darius Alexander as very similar to Walter Nolan. Maybe a slightly not as good Walter Nolan because they did very, very similar things, but Walter Nolan was in the SEC and Darius Alexander played at Toledo. So I do have Darius Alexander ranked below him, but if he dropped to 42, I could see that being a great pick for the Jets. And then, at 73, some projects I see, like Tylee Williams, I think he could be a very good run stuffer in this league. I think he's got to develop a little bit still, but I think he relied a little too much on just natural ability in college. But that natural ability, I think, will translate to the NFL. Josh Farmer could be another good pick for the Jets down there. And the D tackle out of Tennessee, he didn't even start this year. He was more of a rotational guy. But if the Jets are looking for just like a 3-tech D tackle to bring in on third down to just create some disruption, Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, I really, out of like my top 10 D tackles, he's near the bottom, but he might be the bottom, but he had probably the best get off in the entire class. And his effort was good too. So I think those two traits alone will allow him to be at least a consistent role player in the league for a while.
Eli, give me a team that you're expecting to also add to the draft and tell me who you're looking to target on that spot.
Yeah, the Falcons have needed a defensive lineman for the last decade. They will continue to need a defensive lineman for the next decade. So let's take players. They only have picks 15 and 46 in the first 2 rounds. This is a position in need. at a position of depth in the draft class. So I think they're a great trade back candidate to pick up, pick like 26 and a third, right? And target a player like TJ Sanders, who we already brought up, a player I really like out of Texas A&M, Nick Scourton, who's got good size, good length, and is a very good high floor prospect for them. I think would be an awesome pick. A guy who I just love is JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. Again, anytime the defensive tackle is the most mentioned player on the broadcast, there's a good chance that player is making impact plays. And I would stake my claim on him just being a good pro for 8-9 years in the league. Is he going to be Chris Jones? Probably not. Doesn't have that athleticism, but he just plays hard. He is a leader on your defense and a tone setter. It's a player that will raise the floor of a defense. I think he's awesome. I think he's great.
That's the type of day two guy you're looking for. Who's just like, again, the ceiling might not be as high, but the floor is there. And that is a piece that you can now rotate into any defense that you want. And that guy's going to have a long career in the NFL just simply because of motor, work ethic, and just general size. Like the floor is just absolutely there.
True Michigan man.
Well, hey, look, I've listened to that name spoken and at least for the game every single year for the last 4. And the impact has been there. I can tell you that much. Adam, give me your final thought on the defensive line class. Any other last thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I think I'll go back to something I think you included in your last question, but I may not have answered, which is just like, who's a personal favorite?
Yeah. Who you banging the desk for here?
I am banging the desk hard for Shemar Turner. Man, the effort, just the gritty, like grittiness might not be the right word. He does have grittiness, but just he's a fighter. You see him just in the complete muck of just offensive line, like run blocking schemes, and he's just fighting his way through there, and then he's on the other side and making a tackle in the backfield, and it's like, wait, his hand placement was terrible, but okay, he just got through everyone, and I really like Shemar Turner. I don't know if it's he's Shamar Stewart. That the name thing is helping overshadow. Shamar Stewart's also, a little more of a physical freak. A little more. I mean, Shemar Turner looks very athletic as well. He's a little stiff, and again, he doesn't have the most accurate hand movements, but active hands, effort, and results. Like, I'm seeing results. I'm seeing him beat offensive linemen constantly. I'm seeing, like, I wrote in my notes that he easily sheds block, and it's not an exaggeration. He grabs onto an offensive lineman, he decides which way he wants to go, and he throws the offensive lineman away so he can go that direction. And again, it's raw. You're going to have to trust your D-line coach, but I think the majority, if not every single D-line coach in the NFL would watch this guy and be like, oh yeah, I can turn him into something. So yeah, Shemar Turner, that's my guy I'm banging the desk for.
All right, Eli, who you banging the desk for? Give me one name that you want to brag about in 3 years when you end up being right. Give me that name.
I just love CJ West. I love the way that he plays. I love the way he leads the defense. I love the way he uses technique to beat blocks. I think he has some real translatable skills to the pro game. He's a guy who you take in the 3rd round who gets a 3rd contract on your team. And you go, man, CJ West has been here for 10 years. He's 32 years old, and we love him, right? And he's done great things for us. I think when you look at the D-line position, there are only so many guys at that size with the athleticism to be successful in the NFL. Pro Bowl rosters are not the end-all be-all of talent. We know there's so many flaws in the voting, but overall, they're a pretty good barometer of top-end talent in the league. And when you go back the last 5 years and look at the D-line, the interior and the end roster groups, they're first rounders. They are almost exclusively first rounders. And so if you want top end D-line talent, you need to take them early. It's been shown time and time again in the league. So these teams that are hoping to patch it up in the later rounds, the chances are you are not taking the player that's going to have that great impact on your defense. So take these guys early. If there's a guy you love that's big and strong and fast, take him early, right, and
Yeah,
develop them. I think that's the way to go when you're building a team out.
I think that's the
A
point
lo-
too. Yeah, there with
yeah,
the big, strong, and fast, because it really is the guys who can just physically. After enough time, anyone can learn the technique. But if you're just physically bigger, stronger, and faster, and you learn the technique, then you get Miles Garrett, and it's all over.
yeah, and it's actually why I'm kind of lower. I know we've talked about Mason Graham going like to 5 or 6, and I've watched him more, and I'm kind of lower on him
Interesting.
than I think
Okay.
others are. Yeah, for that reason. I think he's pretty athletic. I think he's got pretty good size. I think he's got pretty good technique. I think you're looking at a really solid player. The top 5, that's a little rich for me. Just as a on the flip side of banging the table for.
Yeah, I was going
Flip
to say
side of
that may
banging on
be
the
the
table.
clip.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that's the clip. Is that the soft pattering on the table instead? Well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna end this episode before any more Mason Graham insults are thrown on this podcast, because how dare you, all of you. That just about finishes up our show for today. If you enjoyed the show, then make sure you subscribe to the Front Office Playbook wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss an episode in the future. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to rate and review us. 5 stars, always welcome to a couple first round picks in Adam and Eli. And while you are at it, be sure to follow the Front Office Playbook on X, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch to be informed of all of our live shows, scouting videos, and more. So stay up to date on everything happening around the NFL and its impact on your team. Be sure to check back in soon for a brand new episode where we tackle a different position as we lead up to the draft. And be sure to reach out to us on X to tell us what topics, contracts, positions, anything else you think we should tackle next. So until the next episode, for Adam, Eli, and myself, stay safe out there. And as always, thanks for the listen.
Peace.